forest garden that I started in 1994, so it's nearly 15 years old. Next spring it'll be 15. It was a pasture field when I started this project. And a forest garden is, it's a garden designed and maintained specifically, not using the normal kind of tenets of gardening in many ways, but actually taking its vision from nature and very much based on a natural ecology of a young forest. Now, we're not used to doing that in this culture, and so walking through a garden, you know, with big trees towering above you and fruit trees and other things stuff, is quite a different walking through most gardens, and it feels very wild in places, and that is all part of the system, and it's deliberate as well. So the whole point of making a forest garden is that if you look at how people use land to grow food or other items for people, it requires energy input. However you do it, whether it's tractor energy or people energy or agrochemical energy or whatever it is, it requires energy. And the further away you get from a natural forest, certainly in this climate, the more energy it takes to actually maintain that system, because land is always trying to get back to being a forest. If you leave a piece of land and do nothing, it will become a forest in this country. Eventually, it might take many decades to do it, but that's what it'll become. And so there's a natural energy, a natural tendency to move land towards forest. And the further away from forest you're trying to keep land, the more energy you have to expend every year to do that. So a forest garden is actually very near to being like a forest. So in fact, in energy terms, it takes very little energy to maintain a forest garden once it's set up. But by careful design, you can still make it a very productive space in terms of, I mean, food is obviously important, but I grow a lot of other things in this forest garden for other uses. Medicinal plants, of which I'm sure we'll see a lot, dyeing plants, plants for fibre use, all sorts of other things. I grow mushrooms on logs, as well as the ordinary things you'll see. I mean, you'll see the odd apple tree. There's actually not that many kind of quotes normal unquotes fruits in this garden. You will see apple trees and plums and stuff like that, but there's a lot of unusual stuff as well. So basically a forest garden is a designed ecosystem, if you like, based on a young forest. It has to be a young forest in our climate, because whereas in the tropics, where forest gardens have been around for thousands of years, they can get away with planting trees a little more densely, because the power of the sun is 8 times what it is here, and you can get enough sun energy underneath trees to grow a lot of stuff. Here we have to be a little more careful. We don't have that amount of sun energy, especially in a summer like this. So, you know, tree spacing is important. It's important to let some light through between trees so you can actually use the understory layer productively. So everything in this forest garden is useful, directly or indirectly, I should say. And actually, in fact, I mean, if you want to look into it deeply, you could probably go and say actually every plant is useful everywhere, indirectly or directly, because it will help the ecology of the area. But some of the plants here are specifically for bees, for example, and to attract beneficial insects that will actually eat any pests, insect pests. So, you know, I don't have any pest problems from things like aphids or stuff like that. Certainly some occasionally turn up, they just get eaten very quickly because there's a huge population of beneficial insects here. So, you know, useful is a wide term. You know, I use that very widely, and it might involve some plants are there just to help other plants grow. So there might not be a direct yield or a direct benefit for people at all, but everything will help the system in some way or other. So you know, it's a wide definition I use. There isn't much history of forest gardens in our climate. There's a lot of history in tropical areas and in some temperate areas of the world, particularly temperate China. Forest gardens have been around for a long time. In this country, it's still slightly experimental. I'm experimenting in this forest garden, certainly in places with different things. But it has big potential. You know, as a low input, sustainable type of land use, it has big potential. If you look how forest gardens are used in other parts of the world, people usually use them on a home scale to grow most of their food, plus their medicinal plants, because most of the world still depends on medicinal plants. They may grow a staple crop, a staple carbohydrate crop, maybe on a small field scale elsewhere, because carbohydrates are high energy and they need high energy to make them. That means sun. They need full sun. You can't grow carbohydrate crops in the shade of trees. If you wanted to grow them in the forest garden, you'd have to make a space where it's light enough in the middle to do so. So you know, apart from carbohydrates, forest gardens are usually used to grow everything else that a household needs. So by their character, they're really smaller scale systems. This forest garden is 2 acres, and that's probably a typical kind of size if you look elsewhere in the world as well. And typically, I mean, it varies a lot, but typically there might be 200 or 300 species in a forest garden that the person or people who manage it will know all those species. They'll know where they are. They won't get used all the time. Some might be medicinal plants that are only used once in a blue moon when they're needed. This kind of intimate nature and small-scale nature means that it's not a land use suited for vast areas managed by one person. You know, it's not applicable like that. I don't see that as a problem, of course, but that's something that Western agriculture will have to face in the decades to come. But they are more suited to small-scale systems. Yeah.